10th, 2020 Kaiser Planning Commission to order. Debbie's noted attendance. Before we get going, just a couple quick announcements. First off, I just wanted to thank city staff for all of their hard work over the last couple months. There's been a lot of changes to the way we've done business. If you can see the room right now, we're clearly many feet apart. I don't think I've seen Shannon that far away, except for when he's running for me in the parking lot. But, you know, just a huge congratulations to the city manager and all the city staff for maintaining excellent work product. Shane and Nate were both in constant communication with me as it related to necessary meetings or not through April and May. But we're back here today, so I just wanted to say thank you for that. And without further ado, let's move on to the March 11th minutes that were sent out. Any comments on the minutes? All right, well, let's go ahead and get a motion on the floor for the minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Commissioner Whalen, a second by Commissioner Callier to approve as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Debbie, as always. All right, so for our next order of business, we have our appearance of interested citizens. Debbie, do we have anybody signed up tonight?
No.
Okay. Oh,
That's next, oh, it's not either, oh, sorry, yeah.
as I was.
It was on all the other agendas.
Correction,
I
I was going off my old notes. Correction to the agenda, the second order was supposed to be, the third order, excuse me, was the volunteer appreciation. I'd like to welcome Sarah Head up. Sarah is with the Volunteer Coordinating Committee. And most of us up here have interviewed in front of her, so welcome, Sarah.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone. As he said, I'm Sarah Head, and I'm here on behalf of the Volunteer Coordinating Committee. We like to take time each spring, I'm a little late, sorry, to thank our volunteers. And many of you have met me, and I have something to do with you sitting in these chairs, so my apologies. But I probably asked you very carefully how much reading you like to do and about your attention to detail. So we just really appreciate how much you do for our city, and I know that this committee is a lot of work. This is not just a show up, say hi to everybody, sit down, and everything goes smoothly and it's so easy. And we really, really appreciate the time that you put in and the work that you do to make our city amazing. So thank you so much, and I have cookies for you, and I'm gonna put my mask on before I get near any of you. Okay? Thank you.
One of the things that Debbie often sends out is upcoming notifications about positions that'll be opening up, and we'll talk about that more just a little bit later. So back to appearance of interested citizens. Looks like I've got nobody signed up. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the text amendment, the public hearing on the proposed text amendment for section 3.106, property line adjustment, and section 3.107, partitions. We'll go ahead and pass these cookies off to Commissioner Whalen and open the public hearing at 6:04. And we'll hear the staff report, and commissioners, if you have any questions, let's hold them until the end and see what Mr. Witham and City Attorney Johnson have to say.
All right, thank you. So tonight we have the public hearing on section 3.106, which is property line adjustment, and section 3.107, which is the chapter regulating partitions in the Kaiser Development Code. In my staff report that I sent out to you guys, I tried to kind of explain the reasoning for where we were at. This was specifically an issue that got brought up, excuse me, by Commissioner Grenz at our January kind of put the work program together meeting. And I felt like it was timely with some of the additional concerns and question marks out there on the COVID pandemic and how that may affect some of our approvals that are out there or that are pending, and what those timeframes may be, if they may be changed or not. We looked at the chart that was provided in the packet. Actually, Commissioner Grenz's office provided that to us, and we did some additional kind of research and call around, and there was some There was some additional information we found out. There's some communities that are actually looking at possibly extending some timeframes even more than what's listed on the chart. Some have some different associated fees with those extensions and whatnot. But I think it really does paint a good picture that a lot of different jurisdictions have a lot of different standards. And currently in Kaiser, what the language has previously said for both property line adjustments and partitions, that you have from the date of approval, you have a year to get the project recorded or platted, and then you could have a one-time only 1-year extension. In subdivisions, the language was that you can have extensions 1 year at a time, and there was no cap. So what we've proposed to put before you for consideration is this concept where we would kind of align the partitions and the property line adjustments to be more consistent with what we do with subdivisions, which is a 1-year extension, but we're eliminating the cap of only a one-time extension. And so that's kind of the crux of it. A couple of the things I do kind of want to point out is from my end, you know, I kind of wrestled with it a little bit on whether or not that initial time frame should be even increased beyond the year. Ultimately, I landed where I did in that I feel it does provide a level of flexibility without overly extending initial approvals beyond what's been necessary to accomplish projects in the past. I think, you know, with the development pattern in Kaiser that really has been the last pretty much 20 years, we see primarily infill development. So, you know, large lots within existing kind of neighborhood areas that get split into further smaller parcels. And so one of the concerns of having a very long approval time frame is, in my mind, when you look at public involvement goals of the land use planning system, there's kind of an expectation that neighbors have opportunity to be involved in the planning process. So that was kind of where I just said, hey, I think this 1 year at a time extension thing, it gets us the same place at the end of the day. And frankly, it was changing 2 sections of code instead of 3, because I definitely would want to see consistency from an administrative point of view. There was already some confusion because of the lack of consistency between subdivisions and partitions. So I definitely want to see that kind of the same. With that, I am open to any questions. I think that's all I have to say about it.
Anybody? Yeah, Commissioner Whalen.
I'd like to ask Mr. Grenz, in your professional hat, multi-tech, do you see this being reasonable for all parties that get engaged in this thing?
Increasing the, increasing the number of extensions for partitions and property lines to be beyond 1 year and one only extension is fair. It does put a little bit of a burden on staff in that initial 2-year window that they've got to review if any development codes have been updated. And my opinion is if you extended that first year to 2, you're not really risking less public involvement. The likelihood that people are going to move in next door and not know what's going on is pretty low. All land use approvals in Kaiser are available online, searchable by GIS mapping. So if somebody's interested, they can find that information. Not to say that I haven't worked on projects where people have moved in next door and they haven't used those resources and have been surprised. I don't know, it's kind of the world we live in.
Okay. But the information is there, so if someone wants to be aware, I mean, I think as an individual, I have some responsibility to know what's going on next door to me or my neighbors, or,
Well, I mean,
and that opportunity is there if they want to take advantage of it.
It is, and if it wasn't available as easily as it is in Kaiser, there's always staff
Right.
that can be asked.
Okay,
So, yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Keller.
Thank you, Chair. Shane, the only concern I had was, and I get the impression that these aren't like these aren't issues that come, this issues doesn't come up several times a month. My concern is we apply for a plot or subdivision, whatever, things happen, we don't get it done in the year, we ask for an extension. Is 30 days enough? And I'm not so worried about the first extension, I'm worried about the second extension. Wait until 30 days before, why hasn't it happened in the first couple of years? And every year we pile on this is more code and things you or somebody has to go back and look to see if there's been any effect. Is 30 days enough time?
I believe that it is, yes, just because of the fact that we don't have, I mean, I gave you some percentages. I mean, almost a little over 40% of partitions have requested an extension in the past few years of approvals. So it is pretty common that people request that first extension. But normally when that extension gets requested, a lot of times they've been pretty close to getting it done. There has been just a couple of times where the timeframes got pretty wonky. And I will say our zoning administrator, Nate Brown, who's no longer with us, but he was very creative in how he was able to get people's projects done. And this language that we're proposing guarantees we have the ability to do it, and there's no question mark on it. But I don't think that 30 days, because really the kinds of things that get changed that would prevent a partition from being approved, I mean, our office is going to know of those changes, obviously, that have gone through, because it's really going to be lot size, it's going to be access. There's not going to be this huge amount of research we have to do to determine whether or not it can still be approved. So I do think 30 days is adequate. I think what's hard is that when we've dealt with the extensions in the past, a lot of times you have a property owner or a developer who's working hard to get their process done, and they basically know what their deadlines are and they're trying to meet them the best they can. And so they're going to know where if you had to request an extension 60 or 90 days out, I feel like they may still feel like they're going to get it done in that time frame, but they wouldn't know, and then you'd be in that last minute position, which I don't want to see happen.
Well,
So
that's what I'm getting at, is 30 days last minute. And is there any situation that you foresee where this is all involving staff, but is there any time that somebody could ask request a 30-day or request a 1-year extension within that 30 days, or just at the 30-day mark, where that has to go to planning commission or has to go to some other place?
with the language that's proposed right now, no, it would not have to go back for anything. So yeah, there wouldn't be any additional process. I mean, frame of reference, for the most part, partitions, we process them. There's a 2-week comment period, and then we write a staff report, and there's a 10-day appeal period. So most of the time when a partition comes in, we process the original approval in a 45 to 60-day window, which often is driven more by the mailing and the statutory timeframes than it is by the staff load. So that's where I really do feel 30 days is adequate.
So, follow-up, City Attorney.
I was actually on a slightly different issue, if you were following Mark's, or did anybody? No? Okay.
No, it was kind of a follow-up question regarding.
Oh, no, go ahead, because mine's different.
So the 30 days, to me, as I read this, and I'm just trying to clarify for my own sanity, is more of a threshold time frame. So if they come in at 32 days, technically they've missed the ball, right?
No, they'd be
The other way.
around. If they came in at 28, they'd miss, but if they came in.
No, as I was. Correct, thank you. backwards math going the other way. So if they came in at 28 days, they've missed that 30-day threshold. But if they came in at 31 days, then that's kind of the stay of that original timeline, right?
Right.
So even if it does take you 45 days to process it, if they're in prior to the 30 days, does that stay that original timeline?
Right, and for the extension, it wouldn't take us the 45 days to process an extension. An extension is simply a letter that gets added to the file, but there is staff review. We reach out to the Public Works Department, we reach out to the City Engineer's Office, we reach out to the Fire District, the regulatory folks that provided comments that became conditions. We reach out to those folks when we consider whether or not to approve the extension request. So that's the staff work, and then of course our own development code if things have changed in our development code, so.
So Commissioner Grants, did you have something to follow up on Commissioner Collier's? Can I go to Commissioner Grants, or do you need to go?
No.
Okay, Commissioner Grants.
I actually had something to follow up on Commissioner Collier's. My experience is most jurisdictions, 30 days is what they outline in their code. I don't even know if Salem has a 30-day. If you turn your extension request in the day before, Marion County, I know, is as long as you're in before it expires, you're good. So.
City Attorney.
Thank you, Chair Lawyer. A slightly separate issue to me, and I don't opine on policy at all, so whether you do a 1 year or 1 year extension or however you want to change it is fine by me. And this is true in subdivisions apparently. There is no limit on how many times or how many years can go on. And I don't know if Jeremy can tell us if any other jurisdiction have an outside limit or not, but I guess I would have a little bit of concern both on the issue of the neighbors, but also code changes. I mean, you have that proviso in there that says you don't get an extension if there's a code change, but still it's like, you know, and maybe it just doesn't happen. I mean, there's obviously a financial drive to the developer and the owners to get it done anyway. But that just was an issue I decided I needed to raise with you folks, whether or not you feel that's necessary to have some outside limit or not.
Commissioner Oster?
Yes, I have a question for Shane. Can you clear up the partitions? It says submit and then 10-day appeal window. Is that for your office or is it for them?
No, that's just from when a partition decision is issued, there's an appeal that the applicant and or any citizen could appeal that decision, whether or not it was an approval or a denial. So then that would be appealed up to the hearings officer. So that's what kind of creates that 45 to 60 day window when we normally are processing a partition, which by the way is extremely fast because our jurisdiction is amazing. But, and I think that Commissioner Grants would attest to that, we do a pretty darn good job of processing things in a very timely manner in our department. So, but that's what the appeal period was, so. And the one thing I will say too, actually, Commissioner Grenza brought this up, and I was like, oh, thank you, yes, that's a good point, and I forgot to say this, it wasn't in the staff report, but there is a provision in the ORS that limits subdivision and partition approvals not ever to exceed 10 years by state statute, so.
So there is a way outside date.
Yeah.
As
and
applies to both.
And that's 92.040, I looked that up today, and so that is, anyway, I'm not advocating that we would look at a 10-year window, though.
All right, Commissioner Collier.
Yeah, 10 years is a little ridiculous, but there again, it does, the way I read this, it says the city staff may extend, which means you don't have to.
Commissioner Collier, you are of like-mindedness with me.
Yeah, so Commissioner Collier and Shane are of the same mind on that. That there's no criteria there except if there's no code change. So I'd be hard pressed to say that you could deny that extension if there's no code change that affected it, because there's no criteria that says okay, this is what we're gonna look at to decide if you deserve an extension or not. As a matter of fact, I thought seriously about changing the language, to make that clearer about, granting it, but I
Well,
didn't go that
just,
far.
I thought about capricious and, reasonableness, past practice. You wore a green shirt today. That's too bad. Denied.
So beg my forgiveness on this question. How long is the original time frame good for from the original application?
So it's from a year.
So it's just 1 year, okay.
From a year when the decision is final, so
Yeah.
a year from the very, very end of the process, then the year starts then.
Okay.
So if you had somebody apply at the beginning of the year, they went through, by the time all the mailing notice and the appeal period ran, it was the end of March, let's say, then they would have until the end of next March.
And every decision that we render actually has a hard date in it. So
Right, yeah.
there's a date that says the plat shall be recorded by such and such a date.
So everyone, yeah.
So,
All right. Any other thoughts or comments? You look like you're chomping at the bit there, Commissioner Grants. Nothing?
Just excited to be here.
No, no marriage analogies or other fun?
No, I'm just happy to be out of the house.
How long, I can keep this going. I mean, I can find somebody to rattle off something for a
Not on
while.
my account.
Okay, fair enough.
Dinner yet, so. What's your,
I was just itching.
Okay. Okay, well, I mean, reading through this, to me, it seems like a pretty reasonable proposal, so, I don't know if we don't have any other questions or comments, we can close the public hearing. No? All right, we'll close the public hearing at 6:22. All right, let's get a motion on the table. Anybody? Commissioner Keller?
I move we accept the proposed text amendments 3.106 and 3.107 as outlined by the staff's report.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion by Commissioner Keller and a second by Commissioner Whalen to accept the proposed text amendments for sections 3.06 property line adjustments and sections 3.107 partitions as presented by staff. Any further discussion on this motion? Commissioner Grants?
I would encourage the commissioners to consider revising that initial approval timeline to 2 years. I mean, in Shane's staff report, it outlines that 40% of both partitions and subdivisions nearly get that first initial request, which demonstrate that it's can be a burden to get through that entire process in 12 months. I'll defer to the commission on that ultimate decision, though.
Commissioner Whalen?
Question, Commissioner Grants, so are you saying 2 years with still having a 1-year extension?
Yes.
Okay,
So 2 years at the outset with the option for extensions beyond 2 years.
That would be what I would recommend.
Any heartburn on that, Shane?
I don't have a lot of heartburn over it. As I kind of alluded to, this was one that I really did, I won't say struggle, but I thought pretty long and hard about as to whether or not we should up that initial. Frankly, whether or not you have a 2-year approval and a 1-year extension to get a project done, or you have a 1-year approval and 2 1-year extensions, you're still looking at 3 years at the end of it. And I'm hoping all the projects get done in that time frame. So I wouldn't have a huge pause with that. The only thing I would urge Planning Commission to do would be to also address the subdivision time frame, though, because it's still sitting at 1 year. So I would want to, and I don't know, I might have to defer to Attorney Johnson here, but I would want the motion to include that we address 3.108 to have that same 2-year initial time frame.
Are you making that?
I'm just speaking as myself. I'd be a little uncomfortable about putting 3.108 on the table since we didn't notice it as a public hearing, but that's just me. Is that wrong?
That's why I said we might have to ask Attorney Johnson on that one.
you know, there might be some issue with that, I suppose. I guess, two comments on that. Technically, I believe you're right, Matt. But as a practical matter, this has to go to the city council, and we can add that in the notice. DLCD wouldn't like it. I guess as the other practical item I would note is you're not decreasing it. I suppose the people that would object possibly would be somebody who doesn't like development. I'm trying to think of who would object to that. I mean, I think you have a good point technically. It's sort of up to you folks. I'm not overly concerned about it if you want to address that now rather than go through another process on it.
Commissioner Whalen?
I think if we can have this included by the council taking appropriate action to make sure it's noticed properly, let's just clear this all up at once and be done with it. Move it forward.
Yeah, if everybody's comfortable including 3.108, then I would say let's do it. If we can't, if we're not going to, then let's stick with what staff recommends.
I want to hear, as the person, whether I will accept a friendly amendment or not, I would like to hear from Shannon when he mentioned those letters that he thought they may not be happy about it.
DLCD?
Yeah, why wouldn't they be happy?
Well, I'm sort of joking. I don't think they'd really care that much. The notice that Shane sent to DLCD said this is what we're looking at changing.
Oh, I see.
See,
Gotcha.
and so the change didn't note that. Now, I have in the past, I don't know if Shane still uses that weaselly language I used to come up with years ago about and any other reasonable associated changes. I used to add that in the notices, both the published notice as well as the DLCD notice, because these are connected matters.
Yeah.
That's
you know?
probably just now understood.
Yeah.
Well, and in 3.107, I believe it, or maybe it was 106, it does reference subdivisions in the language, I believe. So,
Probably for 3.106, because a
Yeah.
property line adjustment can happen within a subdivision as well.
so if we're looking at, well, and actually 108 is actually in here, interestingly enough.
I included that for your reference, just so you would see that the language was kind of lifted from there. And the one thing I would offer is that it has not, and again, I haven't been attending Planning Commission forever by any means, but even in the last few years, it has not been out of the norm where a text amendment comes through and then the legal department identifies some other sections that are affected that weren't originally identified by staff because something is connected. And it is, I think it is difficult. I think it would be in my opinion, it would be a very different perspective if we were creating a more restrictive standard. And I would be much more nervous about that when it comes to the DLCD notice. In this case, if the commission were to make that recommendation to go 2 years and include subdivisions, one of the first things that I would do is I will amend the DLCD notice. It's all through an online portal, so I'll amend that and upload the 3.108 language so they're noticed of it immediately, essentially. And that happens a lot when text, I mean, you give the notice with proposed text. It's very often that proposed text gets changed, and that's why you give a final notice to DLCD and they have to acknowledge it for it to become finalized. So that's my 2 cents.
And I'll correct my previous statement, actually, when I saw subdivision, it was in 3.108, so Commissioner Rents.
Yeah, I do have one follow-up question for Shane before I propose a friendly amendment. Would your staff preference be to include the property line adjustment initial extension to also be 2 years?
I'm not opposed to it. I think it's probably unnecessary and we wouldn't see it very often.
No, I don't think
yeah.
you would either. I'm asking just from a consistency standpoint from staff, would that be your preference?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. Yeah, from a consistency perspective, I would prefer to see property line adjustments, partitions, and subdivisions all have a similar and standard approval and extension timeframe and process. Just because oftentimes there's applications that have multi-facets to them, and it can get confusing if you end up with two different standards in the midst of an application, so.
Okay, then I'm going to propose a friendly amendment that let's see, section 3.10605A, the first line read, survey within 2 years of the final decision. Three 3.10708A read, survey within 2 years of the final decision. Jumping down to the third line, within 2 years, the preliminary approval shall lapse. And add 3.105B, the second line to read,
3.105 or 3.108?
105.
sorry, 3.10805B. Second line read, manufactured home park shall be valid for 2 years. And the sixth line read, construction of the project within the 2-year period.
Okay, Shane, does that catch all the 1 years to 2 years?
I believe that it does.
This is kind of the stuff we were kind of suggested that we do by the folks that did our review, code review, was to not do one thing at a time, but look at all the impacts and do them all at once rather than a piece here and a piece there. So I think we're following what we should be doing. So with that thought, I will accept the friendly amendment.
I will also accept that as the second.
Okay. So Debbie, do you have that all?
I do.
Okay, wonderful. So we're including the proposed change to section 3.108 as well. Any additional comments or discussion on this? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes unanimously. Congratulations on your first solo flight, Shane.
Thanks.
All right, let's go ahead and open up to new or old business and the staff report. Mr. Witham, City Attorney Johnson.
All right, well, because of the agenda, I guess I didn't lead off with this, but on behalf of Nate, thank you for all that you guys do, continue to do, and lady, not guys as in whatever. I'm not speaking to gender. You planning commissioners, you all.
All y'all.
And Nate left us May 29th, so he's off to new adventures and has pseudo-retired. I was hopeful he would actually be here for this meeting so we could maybe have a little send-off for him, but his timing didn't work out and COVID happened and the world kind of got totally crazy. So on his behalf, I know he would want to say thank you for all of your service because you all do a great job and are detail-oriented and make our lives really easy here at Planning Commission. It's a pleasure to work with you. And so for a little while at least, you're going to be stuck with me in an interim capacity. I'll do my best for you. And obviously, I think everyone has my contact information. Please do not hesitate to call me at any time or email me at any time. I'm happy to have those discussions. As far as actual business goes, we have finally received all of the information from the developer for the Area D, the Jug Handle project. And so that is going to be, actually, we're going to be deeming that complete officially and sending it out for the request for comments this next week. It's going to be going to the City Council at the August 3rd City Council meeting for the public hearing. This is one where it doesn't actually come to Planning Commission because it's simply an amendment to the site plan. However, my intention is that we may actually share that with you all at the July meeting. And if not, at the bare minimum, I will be emailing you all when that request for comments goes out so that you'll at least be aware of what's proposed. And obviously with any land use, even though Planning Commission wouldn't have an official, recommendation or anything, as individuals, every citizen has a right to make comments during that request for comment period. So that's exciting. We actually finally got all the documents we needed. It's obviously they're doing stuff out there since there's a giant pile of gravel and a huge hole in the ground and grading that's going on. So that will be forthcoming. We had, our impacts of growth on the transportation project, which Nate has talked a lot about, and I've tried really hard to figure out the title, so I think I finally got it right tonight. I wrote it down. We had a conference call with our consultant, actually, I think on Nate's second to last day, and they've done some initial modeling for traffic impacts and looked at intersections, and now they're going back and looking at actual improvements that would be necessary for the different growth scenarios, as well as the expected growth created by the new River Cherry Overlay District, created by that revitalization plan that we spent so much time working on. So that, we may have some things to share. I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed. Again, everybody's working remotely. It's been a little bit different, but I'm hopeful that we may have some information to share with Planning Commission also on that project at the July meeting. And then the other thing is I just received notice on Friday officially that we did receive the grant to do a kind of a refresh / update of our housing needs analysis and buildable lands inventory that we just completed, less than a year ago.
Right.
But as we know, because of that revitalization project that was kind of happening concurrently and didn't get done in time, it's basically looking to incorporate that plan and those assumptions to kind of update our housing needs analysis and buildable lands inventory. So the good news about that is that in June of 2019, when the housing needs analysis buildable lands inventory was finished, we kind of explained, well, we can't actually officially adopt it and update our comp plan because we show these deficits. The expectation is that with this refresh, we're going to be able to address specifically our multifamily deficit. And so the hope is that with this new work, we will then be able to move forward with actually updating and adopting that study, which we're supposed to do. So that's, to me, that's exciting. It's good, it's necessary, and it will make a much better and more accurate picture of the actual needs in Kaiser.
Is that going to give us the actual Portland State numbers for Kaiser only?
Not that study specifically. It will still be based on the existing population projections that we utilized for the 2019 study. But yeah, that's another, these long-range planning things, these moving targets are a little difficult to navigate. So that's basically it for the new and old business. And I know at the bottom of the agenda, next meeting is to be determined. The reason that's on there is we don't have a public hearing that's scheduled for the July meeting as it stands. We're not planning on bringing something for a public hearing. So I guess, I don't know if I ask permission or what, but I know in the past, I've been working with Chair Lawyer during the COVID stuff. I think obviously if we don't have more information that we're expecting, it may be something that we want to talk about whether or not it's necessary or prudent to have that meeting in July. I mean, I hate to waste commissioners' time if we don't have those things, but if we do have that information, I think it's worthwhile having some discussions. So.
Any thoughts on that? Do we want to just leave it as tentative right now, and then once we get closer to the end of the month, we can?
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. And I guess obviously the reason I'm raising that is that if commissioners are like, no, we haven't been meeting because of COVID and we're back to normal, we want to meet, we'll absolutely I will create work for all of us to do. But, you know,
The only thing, the one piece of value that I think could be helpful just for the public in general is to kind of get an introduction to that Area D piece. You know, it gives them a little bit of something to chew on and prep cannons for the city council in August, but, you know, that's kind of a nicety, not necessarily a have to, since we're not going to be taking any recommendation or action on that, but that would be, I don't know, you look like you had something.
I was just going to say, we've missed out on so much public involvement.
Was that sarcasm?
No, that's just commenting on social distancing.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Gunn.
I would just, you know, not to create more work for staff singular. Is there anything in our review that we had, our code review that we had here last year, that is kind of low hanging that we could take on and do and have it done for July?
No, there really isn't, and that would be the other thing, that if we're gonna have a meeting in July for sure, and I'm fine with it either way, and that's where I'm also totally comfortable with, if everybody's like, hey, let's revisit it as we get a little bit closer. One of the items in our work program was talking about some of the efficiency measures, and before this singular staff throws out a recommendation, I wouldn't mind having a little bit more of a conversation with the planning commissioners and maybe provide you with some research and documentation of what some of the other communities are doing, to kind of get a little more guidance from the commission on which efficiency measures we might want to tackle. I know on that work program, there was a really big ticket item that got talked a lot about that's kind of on hold right now, and that was the concept of the economic land and possibility of an expansion for just economic lands.
Yeah.
Because of the transportation, the impacts of growth on the transportation system project and some other items, primarily being that I have, you know, I'm effectively doing a few jobs now. That's probably not something that's going to be really getting pushed out in the next couple months, because those are some really big policy kind of discussions. And the other thing about that is we've had some additional conversations since January with DLCD and others, and what Nate had hoped would be a pretty streamlined and easy process. Well, we kind of heard that maybe that's not quite as optimistic as we originally hoped for. So, so I think that's one of those issues. But yeah, there's not a lot of low-hanging fruit left. So that, yeah.
Okay.
Is there any strong sense right now whether or not from anybody we want to have a July meeting or not?
Besides a social gathering, unless we're actually going to produce somewhat of a product or an improvement to something,
Yeah.
I have things I can do with these 2 hours other than be here. And staff probably needs the time, since they're been reduced by 50 or 25%, whatever that is, probably needs to dedicate the time they have to
Right.
bigger ongoing issues.
I would agree. Commissioner Hauser?
A thought is that, what's after low-hanging fruit?
Mid-range.
Yeah. So actually right now, and I mean, this is a little bit down the road, but one of the things that happened right before COVID kind of came and destroyed our everything is we have what's called a community assistance visit that we get well, the last one that we had was a long time ago because it was in the old building. They're supposed to be about every 5 years, but in this case, we hadn't had one for like 12 years. And what that is our FEMA Region 10 rep. They come visit us, and they look at our floodplain ordinance, and they look at how we've managed our floodplain ordinance. So they call it a community assistance visit. No offense if my FEMA rep is watching, you're great to work with, but it's really like an audit. So that happened in February, kind of right at the tail end of February. And then they came back to us and said, oh, you guys are doing pretty good, but you have a few issues. And by the way, your floodplain ordinance is, yeah, it's garbage. I mean, they didn't say that. They said there's a lot of good things in it, but there's a massive amount of updating that needs to be done. So ideally, we would have been working on this all along, and we started kind of looking at it and had some staff who were telecommuting for a bit when City Hall was closed. They started doing some initial work on that. And it's literally, there's this big, huge stack of papers on my desk right now. So that is kind of what I have teed up to bring in August, is this kind of bigger project. But due to it being a bigger project and the fact that I've got Area D and I've got this HNA BLI thing, and then Shannon and I we've spent a lot of time talking about home funds and different things. No excuses, but I'm not drowning. So I am treading water, but I'm like, it's right up there pretty high right now. So I know I can't have that thing ready by July, but we do need to get it ready sooner than later, because they like to see us get adopted changes within a 6-month window of the community assistance visit. So my intention is to bring that in August if we can get it all ironed out. So that's, yeah, that will be kind of a significant piece. It's driven a lot by state rules, but yes.
Have we received anything from FEMA about the floodplain map? Maybe that's what they're waiting for. They'll come visit us when they have the map done?
Well, and that was, honestly, it threw me off a little bit, Commissioner Callier, because I kind of figured that these calves and everything, the reason we hadn't had one in so long was the fact that you have this outstanding, the NIMS, the BIOP, the biological opinion piece that we've literally been talking about for the last 3 years. Yeah. Like, we're gonna have these changes due to this BIOP. Well, I think realistically, with administrative shifts at the federal level, certain things get prioritized, and that was one that's kind of, one, it's been held up in litigation some, and two, they ended up going to Congress and requesting like the maximum extension to work through what things will be changed. And I asked that of our FEMA rep and said, hey, shouldn't we just wait for this? And they said, well, no, you really can't wait for this, because right now your ordinance is out of compliance, which could put your community, frankly, at risk of participating in the FIRM program, the Flood Insurance Rate Map program. So it's one of those that it may, unfortunately, it literally could be one where we change it in August and we operate under it for the next 3 to 6 months. And if that actual documentation, which we were anticipating, actually we were anticipating that in, I think, 2022 now. So we probably have it for a couple years, but we know it'll have to get changed again down the road when the BIOP elements are incorporated at a statewide level into floodplain management.
You're evil. All right. Well, I think with that being said, I mean, I'm hearing the workload that you've got, and I think it would be behoove us to make sure you have the time to get things together for August. So if there's no objections, I think we could probably just go ahead and cancel the July meeting now, right? Any opposition to that? There you go.
Okay.
See you in August. All right. Anything else? City Attorney? Nothing? All right. So with that, we'll turn it over to Councilor Freeman. Good to see you as always. Welcome.
Good to see all of you. The light's not on, so obviously you can hear me. Let's see, we have a council meeting on Monday, the 15th at 7 p.m. here in council chambers. One thing I would just like everyone to know, it will be the first public hearing for council for the charter review. So I would encourage everyone to review the document, provide comments if needed, and Commissioner Whalen was one of our committee members on the charter review, actually was the co-chair with Councilor Smith. So we will have 2 readings or 2 open public testimonies or to June 15th and July 6th. So we'll have 2 opportunities since the majority of charter review happened during COVID and we were electronic. It was really important for the committee to have 2, if you want to say, normal opportunities for public testimony. And so we'll be pushing that out probably as much as we can to make sure everyone has the opportunity to do that. No neighborhood association meetings through the summer. Everyone's enjoying summer when it gets here, right? We have Marion County Commissioner breakfast in the morning, and we are back to Sherry's. And I think that's really about it. I just appreciate everyone who watched us on Zoom and Facebook Live during COVID to keep the council meetings going. And we all learned some things, and we'll be moving forward. So thank you.
Those that didn't get a chance to watch any of those charter review meetings, they were quite interesting. I watched most of them on the Zoom, and you guys worked really, really hard on that. A lot of really good discussions and concepts that were brought out, and it sounds like the committee came out with a pretty good recommendation. So, so on June 15th, which is next Monday, I'll do the council update. I've got to be there for another issue anyways, so I'm fine with that. So just a heads up, in the next quarter or so, we're going to have a couple commissioners that are going to be up for positions up for reappointment. Commissioner Whalen will be terming out sometime in the first part of the fall, and then Commissioner Wilson will also be up, I think, sometime around that September timeframe. So be thinking about whether or not you're going to stay on or not. Obviously, Commissioner Whalen unfortunately won't be able to, but you know, if you're out there in TV land and you have an interest in what we're doing here, keep that in mind. Volunteer coordinating committee, Sarah Head that was here earlier, they'll be the ones you'll talk to about that. You'll look online or get a hold of Cedar Recorders, and they can accept applications. So a lot of good work going on with that. Any other, oh, by the ways, witty statements, remarks? Nothing? Nothing? Well, good to see you guys. Missed y'all. All right, we'll stand adjourned at 6:52.
Good job, Matt.